Welcome, welcome, welcome. How is everyone? Good to see you. And yes, welcome to the first Shadiversity live Q&A. Now, you're probably going to be able to, first of all, actually, before I even get that far, tell me how the audio is, guys, in the chat. If there is anything, any problems, any, feedback, let me know. You'll probably realize that there's no video. And that is because I've had a hell of a time trying to set up video live streaming. I've spent like an hour or so trying to get it to work, and I've had massive unsyncing problems to the point where the audio and video is out of sync by several seconds. It's really, really bad. So we're just going to have to do a live, I guess, audio Q&A. And we'll just kind of get right into it. I'll be able to answer your questions. And we're just going to hang out, all right? It's not going to be a very polished thing. It's just going to be a real casual chat where I get to interact with you guys, my awesome subscribers and viewers. And we're just going to hang out a little bit, all right? So that I'm going to try and answer as many questions as I can, but sometimes it's hard to catch all the questions, of course, and due to time, that's going to be fairly impossible. But I'll do my very best, and if I can't get to your question, I apologize. If any super chats appear, I'll do my very best to get to them as well. And so with that out of the way, I will try and get to some of the questions in the chat. So I'll move over to the chat right now. Hi guys, it's good to see you all. I don't know how much of a delay there will be between what I'm saying and hearing what you guys ask me in the chat and stuff. So I'll do my best. Okay, so there's a question here. Are you trained in Hema, and what can we expect in the next few weeks as far as uploads? Okay, that was from Wallace Evans. Appreciate the question, Wallace. So it depends what you mean by trained in Hema. It's an interesting kind of bag of fish in regards to that question, because I've come across different Hema practitioners have very different standards in regards to what they consider to be part of their community, I guess. I've come across many Hema practitioners who feel that unless you actively go to a club, they will call you something like a non-participant, or you don't really do Hema unless you do it fully, which creates a bit of a problem. Now, first of all, if there's any of you who are not familiar with what Hema is, historical European martial arts, of course. And so it raises a problem if you don't have a club nearby, and I don't have a club nearby. The nearest one is about an hour and a half's travel, one direction, and so there and back, 3 hours travel, and that's way too much. I mean, many of you might not know, I actually have I have 3 children, all young, and I have one on the way. My wife is pregnant. And so just that alone, it makes it very difficult. And then there are other issues that get in the way. And so it's very unfeasible for me to get to a Hema club. So what I do is I do drills in my backyard with my swords, and I train. I try and go to some events when I can. It's difficult. And so, I went to the Festival of the Sword. It was last year or something like that. And I got to participate in a workshop with Axel Patterson. And if you don't know Axel Patterson, is pretty prominent in the Hema community, and the workshop was brilliant. And so, yeah, the extent of my training in Hema is that I do what I can with what I have. And so that's looking up YouTube videos and stuff, and saying, hey, Zornhau, that's awesome. I'm going to practice Zornhau, all right? And I'll practice this stance, and I'll practice other things like that, and you do what you can. Now, does that qualify as Hema? I'd like to think it does, but there are some people who feel that that's not that good enough. And it also can disqualify me from commenting on Hema as well. So to each their own, I guess. That they will have to decide for themselves. We have a super chat here. Thank you very much, Brent Fees. So, how would castle defenses in a fantasy world need to be different to defend against flying threats? In other words, what about dragons? The best question in the world. Okay, so I actually have a video, an entire video dedicated to this very subject. How would castles fare against magic and dragons? So I not only answer the dragon question, I also answer the magic question. And it creates a lot of interesting issues, and castle design has to be switched up completely. So of course, I encourage you to watch the video. You'll get a full detailed answer in regards to that. And so just to quickly summarize, it changes things massively, especially the flying factor. As soon as someone can just fly over your castle walls, it kind of renders the castle walls rather redundant in their effectiveness. There are different things you could consider, like you could try and make kind of like a vaulted ceiling portion above the rampart to have a stone roof, which would protect you from, fire breath and things like that. And so there are different things you can do, but it does go into a much more lengthy discussion, which I do go in my video. But still, thank you very much for the question. All right, so going back to the chat. Thank you, Michael. Super chat, love your videos. You know, that means so much to me, actually. Like, I find it a very strange kind of thing when people say that they appreciate my content, because I relate to so many of you guys. Like, I don't think I'm particularly any more informed than so many of you guys. In fact, I learn so much from you, my viewers, especially in the comments and the links that you share with me. Sometimes I really feel you guys know more than me. And so when people say they appreciate my videos, gee, it makes me feel humbled, I guess, because I'm just a regular guy. I'm a regular guy like you guys, and I know so many of you have so many awesome thoughts to share as well that I love hearing and listening to. But still, I very much appreciate it. Thank you for that. So someone is saying there, there's like a 19-second delay between my voice chat audio and the actual chat box here. So I apologize, guys. I spent like 2 hours trying to figure, the syncing issues just with the video and audio, and it was so massive I couldn't do anything about it. So, question: chainmail or full plate for aesthetic or effectiveness? Okay, so full plate for effectiveness all the way. Aesthetic, that's a tough one because full plate, it has this awesome look, but so does mail. And I love a surcoat. Surcoats look brilliant. And so having a surcoat over the mail, so I guess it depends, and really how I'd choose the difference for myself is setting-wise and technology-wise, all right? So if you're looking at a night somewhere between, anywhere between the 11th to 12th and even some of the 13th century, you're looking at mail most of the way. Actually, most of the 13th century now, I think, as I try and think about it. And then you only start to get plates later 14th and then in the 15th century, and the glorious, glorious full plate armor, of course, in the 15th and even some of the 16th century. So, yeah, depending on the time setting, kind of answers that question for me, mail or plate. Full plate with a surcoat? Yes, absolutely, very possible. Interesting, though. Surcoats, from what I have been able to garner from my casual study, surcoats seem to have gone out of popularity when full plate armor starts to come in, and you start to get the tabards over just the breastplate, and then the side parts that doesn't go anywhere lower than the thighs. So, tabards over surcoats when full plate armor was about. Okay, so going back to some of the chat, I've had a question for you. I've had a question for you. This is by Cyber Centuries. I've had an argument with a person about medieval tactics because I doubt foot soldiers or knights just ran in there like idiot knights. Had to have some plan. Yes, it's interesting. I've heard a couple of differing opinions on this, and so I don't fully know where I land. And it's only a kind of an anecdotal thing, and where I've heard that because the medieval period was nowhere near as centralized, when a medieval army was formed, it was fragmented a lot into, the lines of authority, who was controlling which parts of the army. And because some of the knights were noble lords and everything like that and stuff, that they were I get a little bit more reluctant to follow orders. This is anecdotal stuff, by the way, so I don't know the definitive answer about it. But one theory is that they were a bit less inclined to follow orders and ran off doing their own thing. And so if a group of knights on horses saw, something happening on the battlefield and it was, ooh, easy target, they would break ranks and just charge them down, which isn't the best thing because that could leave a certain part of the army vulnerable. Now, as to charging in recklessly, that's a tough one because I'm sure it happened, but whenever you say something happened or something didn't, people generally take that to mean, well, that must mean for the whole medieval period and all knights. No, I'm sure it was different for different knights in different periods, and so I'm sure you had the reckless knights, and then I'm sure you had the knights that did follow orders and didn't break ranks. This raises a really interesting subject that I'm working my way up to making a video on, and that video is about, I guess, when we hear one fact about the medieval period, people tend to take that fact and then apply it to the whole medieval period and every geographical location in the medieval period, which then can create an incorrect view or assumption about what the medieval period was like. And so what we need to try and do is when we hear little factoids about medieval times and everything, try and figure out when, like in terms of geography, that was where, in terms of geographically where, and when in time it happened, and then remember that applies to that, and it doesn't necessarily apply to the whole thing. Now, I do remember one of the questions previously was, what videos do I have planned in the future? Well, the next video coming up is a very, very detailed tour of Honor Guard going through the principles of castle design. And after that, I have a bit of a list, and I kind of pick and choose from that list as I go. Okay, why do the modern English speak English so badly? And that is a super chat. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Good question. Well, it's all a subjective thing, really. I mean, if someone thought English speaking was only done in the way that we speak in Australia, which is a very bad version of English in my opinion, everyone else would then be speaking bad English according to that subjective viewpoint. And, there's a thing called the Great Vowel Shift, and some say that actually, earlier, English speaking sounded a bit more American until this Great Vowel Shift happened in Europe. And then you have the fact that medieval English it would have sounded like a different language when you go back, depending on the time period as well. So, again, a very subjective thing as to what is good English. But in regards to Australian English, I think it's because we're lazy and we like to slur our words. And we like to, make words shorter because we're lazy. Like football? Who says football? Nah, in Australia we say footy. It's footy, mate. And then we just start kind of slur our words together and we start all like this, mate, this is a crocodile, mate. Anyway, that's why it's a very bad and probably incorrect explanation as to why Australians speak badly. Now, we have up to 300 or nearly 400 people joining us in this live chat at this point where I'm sitting right now, and that's awesome. Welcome, guys. That's kind of crazy when you think about it. There's an audience of 400 people here listening to me rattle on and answer questions I can. Super chat, thank you very much, Ryan. Love your work, especially fantasy, rearmed, and novel videos. Have you considered doing a series of videos talking about your fantasy setting in depth? Oh, good question. That's a very good question, Ryan. I have. The first question is, which setting? I have more than one. And then what if this is referring to my main primary setting that I'm writing in right now? And the question for that is that I kind of don't want any spoilers for the book that I'm putting. And for those of you who don't know, I love writing, and I'm working on the final edits for a book that I'm about to publish. And because of that, I didn't want any spoilers. I want the kind of exciting reveal of what that setting is specifically when I announce that the book is available to be purchased once it's published. So that's why I've been holding back on that for a little bit. And in regards to the other settings, because with everything that I said about my setting I'm currently writing on, that's not necessarily a medieval fantasy setting. It's actually a high fantasy setting with a lot. Don't worry, there's a lot of sword fights in it. Okay, a lot of swords in the setting, but it's not necessarily medieval. It's a more very much epic fantasy setting. And I'll have to leave it there. But I have another setting that's very full-blown medieval, and you'll hear some snippets about it in my next video, where I give you a tour of Honor Guard and go through principles of castle design, because Honor Guard is actually based in my medieval setting. And if you want some other insights to my medieval setting, I've run some role-playing sessions on the YouTube channel. It's Tabletop Time. For those of you who are asking, it's still on hiatus, unfortunately, Tabletop Time. But I did run some role-play sessions where I Dungeon Master or Game Master in my medieval setting. So look up The Ruin Witch. If you look up The Ruin Witch, that is a play session that I did in my medieval setting, and you'll get to find a little bit about that. Super chat, King Spade, thank you. I really appreciate that. What's better for penetration of the weaker... Sorry, it's disappeared on me. If I click, does it bring it? Okay. What's better for penetration of a weaker opponent... Magnums or Trojans? I'm sorry, King. I don't understand the question. Of weaker opponent. And this kind of breaks my heart, because there's a super chat, and I really want to try and answer all the super chats. And if I do miss one, I apologize, because sometimes it might slip under the radar. And so that's kind of the thing that I'd like you guys to remember. If you do think about doing a super chat, if you try and think of that this is a donation, which I really appreciate, it's very generous. And of course, I'm going to try and answer the question, but if I'm not, I apologize. And I'm sorry, King, I don't fully understand that. Maybe you guys in the chat, if you can try and explain it for me. Can you please do more videos about the Viking period, please? It's possible. It's possible. I like all things about, the breadth of the medieval period. And it's funny, I've actually been thinking a lot about... It's an offshoot of... the Viking period, which is about, I guess, cultural morality in terms of warfare, battle, what you do and stuff like that, because the Vikings get a little bit of slack now and then for being particularly bloodthirsty. Pausing. Thank you, Slack, for the super chat. Very appreciated. Going back to the Vikings, they get a bit of slack, but I think that's just because they won, or they won more often than not, and people talked about them more often, because when you look at it, there is so many comparable examples of, like, from the Irish, even to the Anglo-Saxons in that time, and also the Franks, mainly in Europe, are doing some pretty vicious stuff and taking slaves as well and stuff like that, where it seems to be a very consistent kind of type of behavior amongst that. So that's what I've been thinking about in regards to Vikings lately. And who knows, that might, create a video, but that can be a dicey thing when you start to go into cultural comparisons, because people can get offended so easily. So who knows, maybe, but that's been what's on my mind. And as to direct Viking content, I don't have anything specifically scheduled in my videos to do for ideas and stuff like that, but who knows, it's always possible. Okay, so pausing to read a question. Shad, serious question. Am I allowed to use your videos in my story? I desire to use things such as goblins hating music and weapons for monsters and monster weaknesses and medieval warfare. Great question from Scholarly Mage. Absolutely. Absolutely. All the things that I make in my video, honestly, I'd be honored and thrilled if anyone decides to pick up any of the suggestions I have for a fantasy setting, for a story, whatever they're doing. And what's interesting, I make those videos kind of just as this is what my personal preference are for how fantasy should be depicted, and depicted this way I think would be better. And it just so happens that many people seem to like hearing my thoughts about it and also agree with me, like you yourself. You want to use some of those things, which is flattering, really, really, complimentary. I thank you for that deeply. And yeah, if you want to use it, absolutely, because that's kind of my intent. This is the way I like fantasy, and if more people start to do fantasy like that way, it just means I get to enjoy fantasy the way I like it. Doesn't mean people can't enjoy fantasy in different ways. Everyone is but I always share the reasons why I think it, if you do realistic ways, better. And so, yeah, goblins not liking music, absolutely. And I encourage you to also think up stuff new, think up ways that you think, unique weaknesses for creatures, because my goodness, they need weaknesses. humans are so overpowered. I sat down trying to think of the next Fantasy Rearmed video, which creature and stuff like that, you know, should I do, and I think of doing orcs, we'll see how, you know, how I go. But gee, humans are always overpowered. They're always so overpowered. And so it's hard to give these specific creatures weaknesses because generally if that one type of monstrous creature or whatever has a weakness, that means it's only unique to that setting and it isn't uniform across the board. So it'll be an interesting subject to tackle when I get to tackling it. Got a super chat by Aaron W. Nicholas, $10. Thank you. I get really, I think it's so generous. So thank you very much, guys. What's your opinion on Castle Guedelon in France, the modern day recreation using medieval engineers' techniques? Any plans from you? My goodness, it's funny. This question gets asked to me a lot, okay? Like, have you heard of Castle, Guedelon Castle being built in France? Absolutely. My goodness, like, Guedelon is almost like a wet dream for me if you don't take that too literally, I hope. Yeah, it's amazing, right? Now, why haven't I touched on it in any of my videos and stuff like that? Because it's not finished yet. I want to see it. In fact, that's one of the main areas I'm definitely going to visit it whenever I do fully intend to travel to Europe, see castle and everything like that. And Guedelon, I am so going to be traveling to Guedelon, but I don't want to travel there until it's done because I want to see it when it's completed. And I have been actually considering doing a video showcasing Guedelon. And for those of you who don't know, this is a couple of... what are they? They're basically... it's a type of archaeology where they recreate it to learn how things could have been built in the medieval period and stuff like that. And so they're building a medieval castle with medieval technology, no modern technology, and building it fully 100%, accurate and everything to what they were like in the period that this castle is meant to be based in. And it's awesome. So if you look up Castle Guedelon, and it's spelt weird because I'm Australian and I'm, English and stuff and spelling and France, but it's spelled Guedelon, taking that from you, Aaron, in your super chat. So if you misspelt it, I've misspelt it. But you guys, if you want to look it up, it's amazing. I've even downloaded certain videos showcasing Guedelon. It looks beautiful. Okay, so this is another super chat by Michael. Thank you very much. Will you make a video about horse archery? I know Lindy Beige made one, but is there more to be said? I haven't considered making a video on horse archery. I know it's a thing, trust me. It doesn't seem to be as big of a thing in the medieval period. If I'm wrong about that, I'd love to be corrected because I don't want to misspeak. Because there are many, many things about the medieval period that I haven't done my research on yet. It's a lifelong process and I love learning as much as I can. But until I do my research on many areas, I'm kind of working off incomplete anecdotal information. And one of those areas of incomplete anecdotal information is my understanding of horse archery in the medieval period, used in Europe and other parts. That it wasn't nearly as big as other, like, of course, the Mongols were famous for their horse archery and stuff. So I don't see myself doing a full-blown video on it unless I get inspired or I learn something really cool about it that I think you guys could know. Like, maybe it was used... In fact, funny thing you say about that, I've actually found some period artworks of knights in armor on horseback using bows. And I saw that and was like, whoa, I haven't seen period artwork like that because people say that knights never use bows. And I found this, medieval knight, full plate armor, and is using a bow. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. So I saved that as a reference point to show that, well, no, knights, even in armor, they did use up bows on times and they were on horseback. So there you go. Take from that what you will. Will that trigger a whole video? I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Another super chat by Micah Do Okami. In fantasy writing, how do you provide background info and lore without info dumping? There's a whole video right there. And this is the tricky thing. Whenever I'm asked a question, I really want to answer it and give it as much detail as I can. And even in prefacing the question, like I'm prefacing now, I go in over detail and I start rambling and talking too much and stuff like that. But I guess some people must enjoy it because you guys are here and listening to me, which I really appreciate. Thank you again. And so, how to avoid info dumping? That's it's a complex thing. I would encourage you to look up Brandon Sanderson's lectures on fantasy writing and see what he says on info dumping, because I echo exactly what he says. You need to basically space it apart and feed it the bits of information. If you can do it in dialogue, it's always better, between characters, and work it into the story. Perfect way to do it. And if you're going to give a bit of information, do it in small kind of paragraphs. Don't dump a page on people unless it's really necessary and needed to. So that's what I'll say about that. I hope I haven't missed any super chats. If I have, I really apologize. Like here's one from Aaron W. Nicholas that I almost missed. So if I miss any, I really apologize. What's your opinion on... Oh, no, that's Castle Guedelon. So I've already answered that. So maybe I haven't missed anything. Okay, cool. Question by Crudeman123. Could you do... oh, no. I've just lost your question. See, God, questions disappear so much. I'm sorry. I was on my way. To do it. Oh no, here it is. Could you do an in-depth video on how to design a sword down to what angles of bevels are effective? Well, that's actually a really interesting question. Also, have you finished your Fantasy Rearmed series, or will that be continued? I'm going to try and continue it. I love Fantasy Rearmed, and I already mentioned that I've already been thinking about the next episode, so maybe how to fight orcs and stuff. If you want me to do a Fantasy Rearmed about a specific fantasy race, like best weapons for that race instead of fighting them, suggest them. Love to hear them. Because I'm kind of running towards the end of all the creatures I can handle. There's a couple I'll be considering, like multiple armed creatures, fauns or satyrs from Greek mythology. That was one I was thinking. So... But doing an in-depth video on principles of sword design, what type of angle, how big they are, I'm writing that down because that... is a good subject for a video, and the great thing about that, I can spit that video out without much extra research on my behalf, which is always a good video in my book because, gee, sometimes it's hard to get to everything. But that video I can do, so I'm writing that down as a very potential one. More super chats, so I'm going to do my best to get to them, guys. Did you see Black Panther? Did the Metallurgy about how vibranium should be impossible for ancient Wakandans to mine forge bother you? It did me. Thank you. Archery? Sorry, bad pronunciation. Yes, I have seen Black Panther. Gee, maybe I should do a whole video on it because I have a lot of... but it's also so political. That's why maybe I'm hesitant to do a video on Black Panther, because that is a politicized movie, and it always seems like whatever you say, you're going to offend somebody. And in those cases, sometimes it's just better to avoid the hornet's nest. But who knows, maybe I will. In regards to vibranium itself, what annoyed me about vibranium is it became the ultimate MacGuffin magic device that they just wave their hand, and vibranium can do everything now. Once upon a time, vibranium had really set principles that it could absorb vibration, and they worked with that, and the fact that the Black Panther suit can absorb vibrations and then release that kinetic energy, that was in line with how vibranium's rules were established. So that was cool, I like that. But then that vibranium can now magically be used to heal people, and then they also is an energy source, and that they can help a race advance beyond belief and stuff like that. They've just gone too far with it. Now it's just wave your hand, MacGuffin. It's magic now. Vibranium is magic, and so they're kind of ruining the use of it there. Still, thank you for the question, and thank you for the super chat. Okay, Zach W has a question here. If gunpowder and other high explosives hadn't been possible, would medieval armor and weapons still be around? Also, love your videos, especially the one on the best weapons for centaurs. Thank you very much, Zach. I was actually surprised how well the centaurs video came out. When I actually film a video, sometimes I get thoughts as I'm filming, so I hadn't even thought about it previously, and kind of the checkmate answer for what's the best weapon for centaurs came to me even, I think it was after I filmed it, and I had to go back and refilm that part because it was such a cool idea. So I'm really glad you appreciate it. Thank you. Now, as to gunpowders and, as to armor being around, if gunpowder and other high explosives hadn't been, yeah, I actually do think that. If, in terms of the weapons battle kind of thing, arms race is what I'm talking about, between weapons and armor. It is always, a tug of war between offense and defense. And we're in a state now where our offensive capability has superseded our defensive technology in orders of magnitude, mind-boggling, to the point that using defensive things like armor and stuff like that is almost useless. Apart from, say, body armor that can sometimes protect you from gunfire and explosives, but as soon as you get to higher levels of, ordnance and things like that, from missiles and then nukes and things, we don't have anything that can protect you from that apart from just hiding away in a bunker maybe. So if those types of technologies hadn't existed, absolutely. In fact, because I'm a writer, I love fantasy settings, stuff like that. I have a full setting where I was just playing around with the idea of what would happen if guns never were invented and swords still remained as the main kind of thing, but other technologies progressed. So it was an interesting setting, ran into some problems because as soon as you start to advance far in like other technologies, like say figuring out electricity and stuff like that, there's a way to weaponize electricity even if you don't understand gunpowder. And so you'd invariably start to develop other weapons that would replace the swords and armor. And so it was a bit tricky to have swords and armor being the main weapons of a modern kind of fantasy sci-fi setting where they have all this other advanced technology separate to guns and everything that they could just build other weapons. So there you go, in-depth answer to that, because I've thought about that in depth to the point of making a fantasy. So thank you very much for the question. Sad Clown, I'm sorry that you're sad. Sad. Why? Thank you for the super chat as well. Why do knights fight snails in much of medieval art? Explain that. So I can have peace. Love your videos. They woke my interest in castle. Awoken, yes, your interest in castle. I'm privileged and proud to have had that wonderful effect. Now, that's a kind of a subject of debate. Why do medieval knights fight not only snails, but also rabbits and things like that? And I have heard different theories, and I'll just share one theory briefly with you. This might not be correct, but it's a theory. But one might have been due to what was... because certain things come to mean certain symbols and stuff like that. So if you try and think of a symbol that represents an individual person or an ideology or a group or a preference, stuff like that in the modern day, they kind of exist, but as you could believe, nothing's coming to my mind at the moment. But certain things end up meaning certain other things, stuff like that, and we can expect that to be fairly similar across the board. And so... like, I don't know, ancient Egypt, the sun representing God or Ra or whatever, or stuff like that. That's a bad example, but I know there are better ones. So, if you look at the medieval period, one of the theories is that the snails actually represented some kind of social convention or type of person or ideology or something like that. And when the knights were fighting those symbols and stuff, that was actually kind of a side pun, kind of like the medieval memes of the day. Like Pepe, here, there's kind of a good example. Pepe the Frog represents something, or is used often. And so if you had an advanced civilization come and look at our memes of the modern day and see all this Pepe stuff, they'd be thinking, why on earth do we have frogs everywhere? Well, that's kind of the same question as why do they have snails? They meant something, and some believe it was a sociological kind of reason or explanation. And it's hard to know exactly what that was, because if everything was understood by everyone, they didn't really need to write it down. Do you have it? Like, it's funny, there are like one or two websites explaining what Pepe the Frog means, but it's not many. And you don't have an explanation of Pepe underneath every single time Pepe is used in a meme or whatever like that, saying this is... And so it's kind of, translate that to medieval period with frogs and fighting rabbits and stuff like that. The people understood what it was, so there was no need to explain what it was, which is why we're so confused when we see it. So that's my very basic understanding of that at the moment. Thank you for the question. Really appreciate it. And we'll go to the next super chat. The forced meme. Okay. Thank you very much for the super chat. In what area of the world would you most like to visit, and for what reason? Well, of course, Europe. Europe and Britain, and it's funny, some people include Britain in Europe, and some people separate all the medieval areas, places, stuff like that. Castles, man, I want to see castles. It's funny, I went to, my mum took, us kids to Disneyland once upon a time, and it was fun, but I didn't really garner as much joy out of that experience as I can at home, playing a video game, stuff like that. I'm a fairly simple guy in regards to my, likes and dislikes, and because of that, I have very little desire to travel and see other places of the world unless it's particularly exotic or something that I'm interested in. Castles in Europe is I want to visit Castle Guedelon. I want to visit Neuschwanstein. I want to visit Pierrefonds. I want to visit Dover. I have a list of castles that I'd love to visit. My goodness, I'll be making videos whenever I eventually do it, and I'm going to be like a kid in a candy store, drooling and just giggling everywhere, because when I actually get to visit a real historical castle, I'm probably going to wet myself. So yes, I intend to visit. Slack Key Traditions, thank you very much for the super chat. What would happen to the Romans if they survived for long enough and the Mongols invaded? If they survived long enough. Interesting kind of a question there, because the Romans did kind of survive. The legacy that Rome left behind in terms of culture and stuff like that, you can kind of trace through Byzantium and the Byzantine Empire. And so if you want to get some insight as to what Rome on a larger scale would have been like if the whole empire survived, you can kind of figure out certain things about what happened in the Byzantine Empire. Now, as to surviving long enough for the Mongols to invade, I don't know enough about the historical period and everything specifically, because I know there was some exchanges between the Mongols and their horse archery and some of the eastern areas of Europe and stuff, but I'm not informed enough to speak authoritatively on that subject, so I do apologize. I'll just have to say that's something I'd need to do a bit more research on. But still, thank you very much for the question. And all right, so I apologize if I missed any of the super chats there. So Sad Clown, and another one, and this is one that kind of disappeared in the chat. But I can acknowledge my presence so I can leave happily. You are acknowledged, sir. I acknowledge your presence, Sad Clown. And so I hope I haven't missed any. Okay, see, oh no, that was a regular super chat that I've done already. So I hope I'm up to date, and we can keep moving forward. Now, I am just going to pause here and see how long we've been going. So the stream has been going for about, 37 minutes so far. I'm thinking of trying to keep this within an hour or so we still got a bit of time. And it's great to see the activity in the chat, so that's awesome, guys. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. So here's a super chat. Maya Luckman. So we've all heard the samurai versus knight debate, but let's change this from individuals to whole armies. Who do you think would win? That's a tough one, and that's the subject of a whole video, and people have asked me that question before. It's a very good question, but also a very complex one. And gosh, there are so many variables, like crazy variables, as to who wins. And what I'm starting to kind of figure out in regards to large-scale battles, and I get this kind of impression from looking at medieval warfare, but also just warfare on a large scale, even World War II, that it's not necessarily the better equipped army or the army that has the most men, but the army that just is in the right position, okay? If you know where your enemy is and they don't know where you are, you have the ability to just destroy them massively, even if you're outnumbered, because there are so many cases where a smaller force wipes the floor with a larger force. But having said that, there are so many cases where a larger force, a smaller force attacks them and you're nothing, and they wipe the floor with them as well. And it becomes such a a thing that's based on the individual circumstances of the individual battle. Like, I've been watching the series World War II in color on Netflix, and there was this interesting account of when the Japanese attacked the British colonies, I think it was in Vietnam, and the British had way more men than the Japanese, and we're talking outnumbering them almost 3-1. The Japanese came in and wiped the floor with them because they just caught them by surprise. And so to take that in the medieval period becomes a very difficult thing, because having the more men or better armor doesn't always mean that you're going to win. And but so if you're, and I get you're probably already figured that, and you're wondering, okay, what if all things are even, right? Even battlefield, everyone at their peak, and there wasn't any great imbalance in terrain or position or knowledge of the enemy or tactics and stuff like that. Who would win? And I can't say. That's something I need to sit down, think about, and try and analyze it and stuff. And I honestly can't say right now. So I apologize, I can't give you an answer just yet. But my answer is that it's a very complex question. But still, thank you very much for the question. So we're going to move on in the super chat. The Hoop Scoop, or Hoop thank you very much for the donation. Shad, love your channel. The channel titled The Study of Antiquity and the Middle Ages has fascinating lectures on the medieval ages. That is good to know. In fact, I actually love it when anyone suggests to me YouTube channels that I'm not aware of that has awesome stuff that I can watch. So I'm copying that and I've pasted it so I can look it up later. Thank you very much for letting me know. The Hoop Scoop, thank you, I appreciate it. Moving on. What was the... so this is a super chat from Matt Kunzler. I'm Australian, bad pronunciation. Okay. Why was the tactic pioneered by Edward IV, pike formation supported by archers, lost until the military revolution of the 1400s? Okay, so this is... I honestly don't know. I love the medieval period, right? And the main things I'm interested in are the swords, castles, knights, what they were and the why. But when it comes to dates and periods, I actually have a very rudimentary understanding. And this is an area where I'd actually hazard the, assumption that you probably know the answer better than me because you sound more familiar with this specific, point in time than I do. As to the general warfare and stuff like that, why pike formation supported by archers and stuff like that, I've actually just been wondering and trying to find a better, more kind of a definitive answer about how, the employment of pike formations, how effective they were, why they replaced the shield wall and stuff like that. And there are a couple of answers here and there that I can give you, but it's something I'm studying, casually in my own time, trying to get more information to be able to find an answer that's a bit more, I guess, official. And so I'll have to get back to you in regards to that and for when I understand it a bit better. Now, I know there was a super chat that I missed. I think it was Kaitimus. Thank you very much. Wait, you missed my super chat a ways above, Myers. I'm sorry. See, gosh, sometimes they just disappear. And my issue is, right, when I get a question, I want to answer it and even my summarized answers are too complex and rambly and just too, because that's a weakness I have. Whenever I'm asked a question, I really want to answer, give a fulfilling, satisfactory answer. And if I don't, and that means I sometimes dwell too much on one question and I let other questions slip by, which I apologize. Like this one from Imiel Vrol. It looks like you have an awesome name, but gee, I can't pronounce it. Do you know anything about traditional African weapons? Might make for an interesting video. Their smelting techniques were quite impressive. I don't know much about African weapons, and I love, melee, archaic, medieval, or weapons of the feudal time period and stuff like that. And that is, it's come up before. I've seen some interesting examples of African weapons, and I certainly know the Zulus were famed to be some impressive warriors. So that's certainly something that I would enjoy looking up. So I really appreciate you asking me about it. I don't know enough to be able to speak, with any authority on that matter right now. So I need to go back to where we are. Sam Backkick or Backish donated $2. Thank you. There was no question attached, but still, I really appreciate the donation. And moving down. So looking at just some of the general questions in the chat. Have you looked into a review of Castle Volknir in Skyrim? So that's the castle that the vampires had. And oh my goodness, the background noise. I apologize for that. Outside, I'm just going to have a look. You are kidding me. Guys, seriously, outside, the electrical company has just pulled up in a massive truck and they're trying to fix the power line or something like that. And there is a huge amount of background noise just... can you hear that? Tell me, is that too much? Is that... Or it's starting to soften down a bit. But, oh gosh, that background noise is heavy. Is it okay? Is the background noise too much? Tell me if tell me if you can't hear me or if the background noise is distracting you and it's ruining the live Q&A. I'll try and keep going, but I apologize for that noise. That is horrible. I hope you can't hear anything. That'll be good if you can't hear anything, and I can just keep going. So, Tuesday's Avenger. $20 super chat. Wow, thank you very much. What is something few of us outside the country would know about Australia? Well, Australians like to tease other people outside of Australia about drop bears and riding kangaroos to school and stuff like that. As to something specific, I killed a tiger snake once when I was a teenager. Tiger snake is like one of the most venomous, second or third, like brown snake I think is the most venomous in Australia. But when I was a teenager, I was reading a book in my room and I saw a tiger snake. And this is something I guess not many people know outside of Australia, or even it slithered past my window. And I was like, oh crap! And the thing is, my parents were away and I was really the only bloke there. And if I let this tiger snake slip away into the bushes, because we lived on a property, we have a flippin' tiger snake in the general vicinity of the house that one of my younger brothers and sisters couldn't get bitten. So I had to do something. So you'll appreciate this, all right? You guys, I'm sure you'll appreciate this. Guess what I did? I got up, grabbed a sword that was hanging on my wall, because I had swords even back then. I grabbed a sword, went outside, packing my ducks, by the way, because it's a damn tiger snake, all right? One bite would kill me. And they were pretty far away from, any medical help and stuff. But I had to deal with it now, because if I didn't, one of my other brothers and sisters were in danger. So I grabbed the sword right outside, and I grabbed a shovel. And I was dual wielding, shovel in one hand, sword in the other. And I saw it on the veranda. There was a concrete, ground with a veranda over top. And I saw it, and then it started to kind of move away, trying to get in the bushes. It's like, oh crap, if this thing gets away, it's gone for good. So I had to rush this thing, and I'm packing my axe. Like, this is risking my life. And then I jump, I get to it, I pin it with a shovel, I pin the tiger snake with the shovel, and then I chop its heads off with my sword. And I chopped its head off with my sword. And so, I was scared. I was so packing my ducks about that. But I killed it. And then I nailed it on the fence as a trophy. So there you go. There's something about Australia. We actually do battle poisonous reptiles in Australia. And I've had my own battle in the past as well. Thank you for the question. Chad Herbert, would you do some videos on how different fantasy races would work together in warfare? Maybe. See, that's maybe, it's funny. Speaking about large-scale battles and warfare is a bit trickier, because there's a lot more variables into, like, when you're looking at a one-on-one fight and you know the exact weapons, and if you say equal skills, it's actually a bit easier to try and figure out who would have the advantage. But in battles, that's tough. And it is a very broad subject with many other... I am considering it, so your question is, would I consider, but as to would I do it, I don't know. It kind of depends on my schedule, because I have so many videos on my to-do list that I just need to get through them. And adding something new that's kind of a new subject is tricky. So maybe, but still I do appreciate the question, Chad. So there we go. Race Rookie, you missed my question, so here is another. I'm sorry I missed it. Do you plan on doing a castle review for some places in Mountain Blade Warband? Well, I'm kind of holding off until the next Mountain Blade is out. As soon as the next Mountain Blade is out, I'm diving into that sucker big time. I'm so excited for the next one. And so I'll probably be doing more like actual Mountain Blade content with it. And that's why I'm kind of not doing any of the old Mountain Blade stuff, because the next one's about to come out. So maybe, I don't know, as a build-up. But when the next Mountain Blade out, I'll be doing some Let's Plays like I've done with Kingdom Come Deliverance, and definitely some castle reviews. And I still intend to do a castle review of Kingdom Come Deliverance. That is still on its way. Still, thank you very much for the question. Jay Rukin, Magic and Fantasy. Do you prefer magic that is difficult to obtain and rare among characters, or easy to obtain? So, do I prefer magic that is difficult to obtain and rare amongst characters, or easy to obtain and hard to master? Good question. I kind of like both, actually. I think both have a place in a story. Magic that is hard to obtain and rare makes the magic feel very special when you do that. And it also doesn't overflow, because magic can be too much of a MacGuffin where everyone has it and everyone's doing it. The other side is, if magic is easy to obtain, hard to master, that also has a really cool element to it, because the hard to master thing makes magic dangerous and difficult, which gives it good... When you ever have a magic system, if you have a system that has costs, okay, and consequences, you can make it more believable, and it becomes much more enjoyable. And so when you have this hard-to-master element, where you might lose control and accidentally kill your friend, stuff like that, and if you be true to that and actually have some accidents happen, it can work really... So my answer is actually both, and it depends on the type of story that you want or are trying to make. Thank you very much for the question. Kaitimus or Saitimus? No worries, Shad. Love your videos. I'll ask again. Have you considered doing a video about the Claymore, its fighting styles, evolution, adventures? You know, I have. I have indeed, because the Claymore is an interesting bag of fish, and I do find people misunderstand it, because everyone thinks the Claymore is a great sword. But the Claymore is actually it's technically most claymores in size are long swords in size, but just on the heavier end of the spectrum, though you can have claymores that are so big that they would fall into the greatsword. See, claymore is like a sub-classification that can fall into two categories. And in terms of how they were used, yes, like, I couldn't actually tell you off the top of my head. This is a subject that I would like to do some research on, and I could do a video after I do my research. I have some anecdotal things. I know some things about the Highlandic charge and some of the battles, but one of the big misconceptions about the Claymore is, in period, the word Claymore is actually using to refer to Scottish basket-hilted broadswords. They were actually claymores, and the big two-handed claymores that you think of when you hear the word Claymore were kind of heavy claymores or something claymore, or just, you know, great swords in their language and stuff. So there's a lot to talk about, obviously, because I'm talking a lot about it. So maybe. And the Claymore is a great subject. So good question. Very possible. Thank you again for the super chat. So, the Hoop Scoop. I have also killed snakes with my sword before. It earned the name Sushamba, which translates to serpent's kiss in English. Well, we are brothers in arms kind of thing. I mean, were you as butt scared as me? Because, I was only a teenager, and that snake, if it bit me, with how venomous those tiger snakes are, oh my goodness, packing my dax. I was pretty amped up afterwards. I was ready to jump off walls after I killed the thing. All that adrenaline pumping and stuff. Yeah. Okay, so that is all the super chats that are appearing. So I'm going to be moving down. I really do apologize if I missed any of the super chats. I'm just trying to answer the questions, in detail, and I apologize. So, looking at the questions, and they're hard to grab because they're just spinning by. Okay, is there a difference between a greatsword and a shuvi handle apart from geography and culture? Shuva, I can't pronounce that, but if you showed me a picture, I'd probably be, I'm assuming you might be referring to, what, I don't know, where would we refer to a Flamberg or a Montante or something like that. But this is the interesting thing, okay? In terms of the greatsword category, there are subcategories that are defined more by location. So, Zweihander, generally Flambergs, and Montantes, they're all different names to essentially the same sword, which is greatsword. And so if, I can't pronounce the name, that sword, yes, probably is, but I actually am unfamiliar with that terminology, or I'm just stupid. It could be very well that I am stupid. And so, thank you. It's awesome to see the interaction, guys. This is great. And we're, passing lots of different subjects, which is also very awesome. I'm going to try and go up the chat a little bit to try and find any of the super chats, because I'm feeling I've missed some. So look, Group Rider, did you see the Tier Zoo video on Australia? No, I haven't. And I know I haven't because when I read it, it's completely new to me. So I'm sorry I haven't, but still thank you for the super chat. Moving a little up to see any of the other chats that I've missed, and I think there was one around here. But I'm not really finding anything, so going back down to the bottom of the chat and we can continue. I really do apologize if I've missed anyone. Hey Shad, did you like the mini castle picture I sent to you on Twitter? I can't remember because there are a lot of tweets that sent to me, but I do try and look at them all. If I liked, I might have hearted it or I might have missed it. So I can't really tell. Sorry, I can't answer that one perfectly for you at the moment. So we'll keep moving on. Heard you mention studying martial arts prior to Hema. What styles did you take? How did they affect Hema practice? What habits helped? What habits helped? Were there things you had to unlearn before you could learn? All right, so I started off in Taekwondo, and after I did Taekwondo, I tried to dabble in a lot of different other styles. I remember really enjoying karate. My friend did karate, and we had a lot of fun having a bash together as well. I loved judo and jiu-jitsu and things like that. And I kept up fairly active training. I started Taekwondo when I was in primary school, and I kept up fairly active training. Even when I wasn't able to go to clubs because of distance limitations, I was still training every day, getting really into it. And I loved having, sparring sessions with black belts, and, I was able to beat several, and several able to beat me. I'm very out of practice. How much of it translated? Well, first of all, the methodology that I developed in learning how to do new techniques and stuff like that, I found translates really well in trying to learn Hema. That has helped out a lot. And the other things that I've been able to put into practice directly in Hema is actually some of the judo moves and stuff, just basic trips. Because one of my strengths in martial arts was wrestling, jiu-jitsu, groundwork, grappling, and things like that. Always had a really good sense of my center of balance and being able to manipulate on others. And so putting that into practice I've actually, like I said, been able to put that into practice directly in Hema, historically being martial arts, tripping my opponents and stuff. And so it does translate, and it was a lot of fun. There is a super chat here from Ultimore, $10. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very generous, guys. Seriously, thank you. It bothers me that the samurai versus knight and etc. debate always focuses on the equipment of warriors and not their skill. Wouldn't the better warrior emerge victorious regardless of the equipment? Someone knocking at the door. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to have to pause right now. I'll be back in just a second. Oh my goodness, I apologize for that, guys. That is very annoying. Deepest apologies, but we can try and get back into it. Okay, so the question. It bothers me that the samurai versus knight and etc. debate always focuses on the equipment of the warriors and not the skills. Wouldn't the better warrior emerge victorious regardless of the equipment? Absolutely, I do agree with that. The problem is, when are you going to... You can't really determine if the knight is going to be better trained than the samurai, or the samurai better than the knight, because that is such an individual, subjective thing. It is very, very hard to, say one side trained more and more effective than the other, because if you're a warrior, you're always going to train as much as you can if you're serious about it to be the best warrior you can. And so to give one the edge in regards to training ends up being a type of, favoritism, or it ends up bringing too much bias into the discussion. And ultimately, I do feel that there were many samurai who were better trained than knights, and many knights who were better trained than many samurais. So when coming back down to the debate, you just have to kind of say, all right, they're both equally skilled, let's look at it, and then that comes down to a question of arms, weapons, and stuff. And so I get it very much, because there are many cases where a samurai would be able to beat a knight if they were better trained and just more experienced and were a better warrior, but that's the same as the knight as well. So yeah, it's a difficult question, and I understand your pain. All right, we have a question from Samuel Kennedy. Would a thrusting-oriented longsword be as effective against an unarmed opponent or lightly armored, or would a more cutting-oriented sword? Well, I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately. It's interesting how topical that is for my recent thoughts. And kind of it's about... I always think about stuff like home defense. Like if someone broke into my home, what sword would I pick to defend myself? And that's against a obviously no armored opponent. And the goal is to end the threat as quick as possible. So you want to kill them straight away. And that raised the question, okay, is it going to be thrusting or cutting? Universally, thrusts are generally more lethal because they have higher chances of piercing an internal organ, but that doesn't mean someone's going to die straight away. It just has a much higher lethality potential. But because of that, thrusting becomes very lethal when you're fighting an unarmed opponent. But the thing is, it doesn't necessarily have stopping power. If someone's just charging at you and you hold your sword out and are able to thrust them in the chest, that won't stop them, all right? They can still run at you and hit you really hard before they're put down. And that's why cuts are considered to have more stopping power, because all that force is hit into that person. And separate to just the cut, there's a lot of blunt force that will knock the opponent to an angle or a side or even back. And if you hit them in the neck, that can be an instant kill as well. So because of that, I subjective thing, to each their own. For me, I would probably err towards the side of a heavy cutting weapon to be able to just take down the person quickly, even if it doesn't kill him. And that's probably a good thing, because I don't want to necessarily kill the person unless that's the only way to stop them. And so because there's a higher chance of surviving cuts than thrusts, because it's harder to get cuts to vital organs, like I mentioned there. Yeah, I'll probably go cutting. And interesting about this, in terms of the whole longsword, katana, fun debate and stuff, and I made many videos on it, you know, right? Out of the swords I have in my home that would be good for personal, you know, home defense like that, the katana would probably actually be the best pick. It's the heaviest, most dedicated cutting sword I have. Now, if I was fighting someone with a sword, this has changed. See, if I was fighting an unarmed person or only someone with a knife, and I pick a weapon, yeah, I would probably pick a katana. But as soon as that person is able to defend themselves with a sword, right, I would then go longsword all the way, because the longsword is a better balanced, quicker, dueling weapon. The average longsword I'm talking about. It's hard to pick the average longsword because there's so many variations. But if I was ever fighting anyone with a significant weapon where it's getting into a dueling thing, longsword. But if I was fighting someone lightly armored who had a much greater disadvantage for what weapon they were using, I would use katana for the stopping power and for the heavy cut. So there you go. Very good question, and I hope my answer has given some insight. We got a question from Mr. Let Me Watch a Video. I love your fantasy weapon theory videos. I would love to see you do a collab crossover with history buffs. Any chance of seeing that happen? I would love it. I love history buffs. You can look it up. Type in history buffs in the search on my own channel, and you'll see a dedicated video recommending history buffs when I first discovered their channel, because I loved the thing so much. And yeah, I would love to do a crossover with history buffs. Crossovers take a lot of work, and so it really depends on schedule, what I have planned, what he has planned, stuff like that. But of course I would love it. I love me some history buffs. And his video on The Last Kingdom, brilliant. Video on Braveheart, brilliant. History buffs is awesome. Okay, so moving on. Brent Fees, $5. Thank you very much. Whenever I say thank you very much, it becomes a consistent. I say it a lot, but I don't want it to sound disingenuous, because I really do appreciate it. Would it be possible to make a video that just gives a quick overview of the different types of medieval armor and their various pros and cons? Yes. Yes, it would be possible. All right, I'll try and give you a little bit more than that. Absolutely, and I've been thinking about doing something like that. Like, it's funny. Sometimes I hesitate to do a video because I expect many of my viewers already know the answers. Like, I thought about doing a video just naming the parts and components of full plate armor. What's a fold? What's a pauldron? But I expect that's kind of a more basic video. Most of you guys probably know it, but then there's a lot of new people coming in the community who don't have that information. And so and for that reason, that's why I'm more tempted to do a video like that, and also a video like this, going over the different types of medieval armor and the various pros and cons. It will be going down to a subjective thing as to what I think works better or not. It might not necessarily be correct, but I'll try and point that out when I make the video. But yeah, good idea. Absolutely. Very possible. Thank you, Brent. I appreciate it. We have a $10 super chat here by Nacho Dragons. That's an awesome name. Okay. All right. In a sent back to medieval times scenario, what modern takes on forge work or weapon techniques, sword, bow, and arrow, etc., could be effectively replicated and be considered an improvement? Yeah, okay, so if I'm assuming if this was, I was sent back to a medieval time, what type of takes on forging work or weapon techniques could be effectively replicated and considered an improvement? So I'm assuming, I'm trying to understand the question as I can. I'm assuming you're asking what could, I or someone improve upon if they went back in time in terms of how they made stuff and whatnot. Well, first of all, if you I can only work on myself. I have a fairly good understanding of how to make steel and the whole process, done a lot of research, and I think I'd be able to explain the proper, percentage to get, the right steel, and also how to make really good crucible steel more prominent and say, if you did it this way, you'll get less slag inclusions in the steel and you'll be able to, and then explaining what's exactly happening in the tempering and stuff like that. You could probably teach someone, because they were able to do it, but it was hit and miss, and it was less consistent. And you could explain how to make it fully consistent for them to make weapons, armor, and all those things like that. So you could help improve the steel. As to the fighting, that's a tricky one, because that comes up to the question of, can we in the modern day who like Hema and like to play with swords and stuff like that be as good as the medieval masters? And I have some detailed thoughts on that subject. It's a whole video, in all honesty. And I think I might have even filmed a video, but I never ended up finishing it on that subject. And it really depends, because and it's a complex question, so I can't really go into it now. And I apologize, because just too many thoughts are coming to me and I'm spending way too much, but maybe I will have to revisit that video for the future. But still, thank you very much for the question. I really do appreciate it. And I feel like a super chat disappeared on me. I had it there ready to have a look at. Like my element, as see this one, I think this is a super chat I missed, but I found it here. As a follow question, what about dragons? Absolutely, that's the ultimate question. What about dragons? We cannot forget the dragons, people. Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. We need to keep that and remember it. All right, so I think we're pretty good, and we can keep on moving. I do need to be, here's a question. I would love fantasy weapon theory. Sorry. Collab. Oh, no, that's the history buffs question. So I already done it. See, I went back to in the chat too far. So moving forward, and as I was saying before, we do need to keep track of time, and we are over an hour already. So I am going to have to bring this live Q&A to an end, wrap it up. And this has been awesome. I actually want to do stuff like this more regularly. So live Q&As, if I can get the video synced, hopefully, maybe someday. Absolutely. So, but also I want to do live hangout sessions with some of the other sword medievally guys as well. I think Metatron is certainly going to be up for that. And I want to make it more regular. So I can't commit to weekly, but I'd like to try. So if you guys didn't get your questions answered, I'm so sorry that there's been so much chat, and they're awesome. You guys are awesome. And look, I think this is a good subject to end off on, because so often when I upload a video, I make a very active effort to read through the comments, right? And more than once, I'm reading your comments and I just get floored, overwhelmed with how awesome you guys are. And when I say awesome, I want to explain why you're awesome and why I really appreciate you. You're smart, okay? You're very, very smart, and I learn so much, and you're always there to share new thoughts or just explain how you're thinking about the video or how you appreciate it. You guys are so friendly, okay? Like really, the community we have here is amazing. You're respectful, you're friendly. There are so few trolls in my comment section that I just get overwhelmed, because you guys, you're awesome, okay? And then you're also funny. So I laugh out loud so often to the comments that you leave in the videos, and it brightens my day. You guys brighten my day, and so I seriously mean this, that you, my viewers, right, that you honestly hold a special place in my heart. And I'm getting a bit sappy, but I mean it, okay? And it makes doing all this worthwhile, and we have this awesome community that we can talk back and forth and just enjoy the things that we love. So thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm so sorry that I didn't get to everyone's questions. There was so much. You've been so active in the chat, which is awesome. I'm really sorry for any of the super chats I missed, but I have loved this, and I'm going to try and do it more often. So if you missed out here, you'll have another opportunity and another chance going into the future. So with that said and out of the way, thank you very much, guys. This has been awesome. I've had such an amount of fun. Your questions have been great. And I can't wait to see you next time, and we'll do this another time. So until then, farewell.